I'm Madeline Gent, and I'm Executive Director of the Associated Artists of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is known for its 90 neighborhoods, but those 90 neighborhoods are consolidated into 9 districts. And in each of those 9 districts is an incredible variety of life, art, culture, and people. In this series, we're going to examine each of those districts a little bit closer by looking at the work of one artist. In today's episode, we're going to look at the work of photographer Ben Schonberger.
Work involves a combination of photography, sculpture, glass, currently a little bit of print media and some performance. There's so many different types of photographers. You know, my aha is normally when what I just made or what I captured sort of is a reflection of like my imagination. When I make a photograph, I typically have this predetermined idea of what I want. I do a lot of sketching, a lot of thinking. Selection is a big deal in my work, you know, making sure like this is the right thing, this is where it needs to be. Just what am I responding to in the space? My work is mostly assembled before I push the shutter. You know, advertising is still connected to like an idea or commerce. You know, it's like, here it is, this is what it stands for, buy it. Art is this ambiguous thing. There's so many moments where you get nothing, or you go and you make a photograph and you'll shoot all day and you just look and you're like, you know, nothing's there. And then sometimes you have a really good day and you get like a ton of stuff and you didn't even know you were gonna get anything. You can see the labor in an image that for me kind of like makes it rise to, you know, be evaluated more or less as like artwork versus like data on your phone. When you go out in the world, you don't always get to be as much of a director as you want, right? You can't say, hey, stand there, look over there, do this. You know, you're just grabbing what's available, but when you're building, you have that luxury to say, this goes here, this light goes here. For the last year, a lot of the making has been happening in places around Pittsburgh. Idea Furnace residency, the Pittsburgh Glass Center. So I was going there a lot, and I was working with a really wonderful team there, and we were making sculptures out of glass, but that all happened at the Glass Center. I'm currently beginning this new project at Artists Image Resource, which is a printmaking space. It's a really wonderful space on the Northside. But I really wanted to do a screen printing project for a long time, and you know, with like any medium, I try and tell students or anybody, you know, I typically begin with an idea and then I gravitate towards the medium that will, or the process that will help me communicate that idea the best. So in my own work right now, I've been thinking a lot about editing, layering, this idea of like redaction and just how information is removed and placed, especially in today's society with like how we're getting information. This idea of like screens and where things are placed, how information is repeated, and also accessible. Screen printing for me has this connection with like posters and media. So it was like this aha when I found the material I wanted to use. I was like, it has to be screen printed. I kind of bring the work back here and then become, you know, sort of the process with it. I think about it. So less making, more editing. So this is a portrait of a former mentor and now friend, but also an art-making interest, a subject. A police officer named Marty Gaynor, who I worked with for 2 years really closely in Detroit. And all I knew when I was gonna meet him was that he was a Jewish cop, and that was kind of this like spark for me. You don't see too many Jewish police officers, maybe in Israel, but not in the United States. It's kind of a bizarre thing. So when I met him, he introduced me to all of this interesting material that he'd collected over his years in Detroit, and we used that material as a way to look at the city and to talk about ideas such as archiving, masculinity, just policing, and just social systems. A lot of imagery that he had made of people that he had encountered during his time and then had to later arrest. So just this really interesting, complex collection, but we use the collection as a mapping system to look at Detroit. Anyway, with this portrait, I was really interested in the Jewishness and the policeness, and I wanted to make a photograph that sort of like balanced both. So I asked him if we could make this in his uniform at the synagogue where he was bar mitzvahed. So when we went into the synagogue, I didn't realize these gold trellises were going to be there. To authenticate the photograph and make it a real experience for him, we had the rabbi present who put the tallis around his neck, and I had this yarmulke designed. The gold on gold was, again, like just this perfect aha, like we were talking about earlier. Didn't know it was going to happen, was halfway prepared, but not, completely ready for the reveal. And I think it does a good job at sort of combining lots of things in his life, like the Jewishness, the policeness, this duality between your profession and your religion, and how do you balance or identify with both, especially when, there might be some conflict. It's like religion, it's this one philosophy, but then there's like your job or your code as a cop, which I thought was really kind of an interesting contrast. It's funny because the awards or your recognition went over the tallis. And when I first showed this piece, this little woman came up to me and gasped, and I was like, oh, she doesn't like it. And she goes, nothing goes above the tallis. It's the connection between you and God. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because that's the awards again. That's the collecting. That's like your life. Like that's recognition. So I thought that was an interesting dilemma that the photograph sort of offered. My work currently has been shown a lot in Europe. So I was a part of a traveling exhibition called Foam Talent, which is a foam museum in Amsterdam. They select 20 photographers from all over the world every year from this call. And if you're selected, you're published in the magazine titled Foam. And then your work goes on this traveling exhibition around Europe. It came to New York in March. It was sweet. And that was a lot of exposure. That was great. People sort of like recognize you now as like an artist, or they think about your work in the context of an artwork, which I think is a really interesting space for work to just be thought about. The community is super important, right? So find people that are like-minded, that have the same goals, and those are the people you should be around. If people are telling you no, or telling you, do something else, that's probably not the right support system. So find your tribe and do it. Next, find a community that you really want to live in, a community that's going to respond to what you're doing. And it can be anything. If you like isolation, go out in the desert and make art. If you like a fast-moving pace, Pittsburgh's pretty cool. Or go to New York or LA. But those two things can be really, really helpful. It's hard to do anything sometimes by yourself when you're not being like supported or encouraged in any way. In any profession, you have this moment where you do it long enough and people start to like recognize you, A, for your commitment, but B, because the work is relevant or timely. Sometimes you're just in the right room at the right time, where you just meet that person. I've applied for years and I've had nothing. Years and years of rejection. I have colleagues and friends that are just miles higher, even more successful, or colleagues that like work really hard and should be recognized, and you just kind of don't know when that happens. But in the arts or any creative field, you kind of have to know that going into it. You're like, okay, this is going to be a big struggle, a big sacrifice. They say your first 5 years out of school are going to be the most challenging, and that's where your friends that kind of start dropping like flies are the ones that are like, I can't do it. Sacrifice.